Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Pluribus episodes 1 and 2. This is the new show created by Vince Gilligan. It's an Apple TV show. I will start spoiler free, I guess, since it is a new show. I can give some impressions before I go sort of heavy into the details. But the weird thing about this though is that I actually knew very little about the premise of this before I watched it. I think I maybe watched one trailer, maybe, but I kind of intentionally stayed away. I wanted to go in cold, so I almost feel like I'd recommend other people go in cold. I guess the main thing to say is that it is a bit more high concept than his past couple shows. It's not a character drama like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul is. It is science fiction. It's very high concept, and I will say that maybe for like half of the first episode, I wasn't disliking it. I was actually thinking that it was very well done. But I was almost getting a little bit of whiplash of like what my expectations of a new Vince Gilligan show was and what we were getting. And the funny thing is that one of the reasons why I felt like something felt different or in a way where it was, not what I expected is that with the Vince Gilligan shows that I love, with those two previous shows, one of the things that I love about them so much is how methodical they are. And a lot of the first episode of this in particular does this kind of, we're jumping ahead in time and we're doing key points in the story to build up to kind of this event that kind of sets the story properly in motion. And I was sort of thinking, one of my favorite things about those other shows is sometimes, like, for example, there'd often be a scene with, say, Mike in Better Call Saul where he's got a plan and he's doing something, but it'll play out in silence. We'll just see him doing little bits and pieces. And we kind of get it as the audience over time. It starts to make sense as we see more of the plan play out. And we realize, that's why you put that thing here. That's why you turned that thing on there. And it kind of just plays out. It's all very visual storytelling. It's very methodical and you watch through the process and then it clicks as you're watching it. And that sort of discovery of like why a character's doing something is so fun and so just engaging, I think, and it's one of the best things about those two shows. I mean, it's not the only good thing about those shows. The character writing is phenomenal. Lots of fantastic things to praise in those shows, but it's one of those things that comes to mind first when I think of them. And what's funny is that this show does actually get that as well. It does get that once things get going, especially early on in episode 2. The entire opening sequence of episode 2 is kind of like one of those sequences, but on a much grander scale. And I realized that the premise of this show kind of allows for it in this really weird, unique way that you wouldn't normally be able to do with characters, which I'll get into once we get into spoilers. So, I mean, did I like the first two episodes of Pluribus? Yes, I did. I mean, I think they're very well directed. Gilligan directed both of these episodes. It's worth mentioning. It's a 9-episode season, I believe. So we got the first two, and we've got 7 more weeks of episodes. They were very easy to get through. Sometimes even shows I like, I find like the opening double episode kind of thing to feel a little bit like not a chore, but I feel it. I feel the runtime a little bit. With these two, I did have a little bit of a break in between the two episodes, to be fair, but like with these two, I got through them very smoothly. All the sequences individually are all very well presented and they tell their story, like I say, visually often and not. Like the premise of this even lends to the fact that a lot of characters aren't really talking to each other. They're just doing. And you kind of get what they're doing as you see it play out, much like those scenes I described from Saul and Breaking Bad. So that stuff is great. There's some great direction. There's a really cool oneer in episode 1 that really stuck out as being kind of this, very like apocalyptic event style moment happening, but we kind of keep it on one character and we see all this crazy stuff happening in the background. Really like that. Rhea Seehorn, of course, is playing the lead role here of Carol. She is a fiction writer, a trashy like romance pirate novel series is what her character's done, and she knows it's kind of trashy, and that's kind of a big part of her character. So we get introduced to her throughout the first episode, and she has like nothing to do with everything else we see in the first episode. She just happens to be existing in the world, and then once things happen, she ends up being kind of important for just almost just bystands, just or happenstance reasons. Like there's nothing like special about her in a character sense, but she's great. Like, her performance in Better Call Saul, it was phenomenal. She really started stealing a lot of scenes by the end of that show and was able to do a lot of great stuff. Here, she's put into a very unique situation, a very unique concept where she gets to play things very differently. I mean, even a lot of the bit actors, like the guest stars doing minor roles, kind of have something unique to do in this as well, in a sense. But I think she nails a lot of this, again, especially in episode 2. And I think the reason why episode 2, I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than the first episode. I think the last like 10-15 minutes of episode 1 might be the best section of the both episodes. But episode 2, because we've established the premise and we've established the main character enough, I think we get to do a little bit more, in-depth stuff, in-depth storytelling with that character. We get to see their gears moving a little bit. When Rhea Seehorn's character Carol is making decisions or she's feeling regret or guilt about something, we're starting to understand the context of it a little bit more, and can almost like get excited about a decision she's going to make because we've set up the character well enough already in episode 2 that we can have those moments of really knowing who they are and like expecting their actions. Or when she deviates, you get excited because she is deviating in a way that makes sense, and it's not in a random way, but just in a way that's like, oh, this is growth, this is change. So, no, honestly, I'm really avoiding talking about what the premise actually is because I feel like you should go in cold. So I'm probably just going to give the spoiler warning so I can start talking about it. But if you like Vince Gilligan's previous shows, if you like the sound of a high concept science fiction show it starts off feeling very similar to another sci-fi concept, to the point where I was like, oh, it's one of these stories. I had that thought in the middle of episode 1. And the character of Carol even references this like movie in episode 2. But I think by the time you get to the end of episode 1 and it's spelled out a little bit for you, you realize what makes it different from that classic sci-fi movie example, and that it's doing something kind of weird and unique and feels very, very, it feels very creative. And it's exploring definitely some of the same themes as that classic sci-fi movie. There's also a horror trope that usually taps into a lot of these same themes, which I think we're also exploring. So I'll get into all that, but it's very good. Just, yeah, watch it. I think the first episode's even free, regardless if you've got Apple TV Plus at the moment, so you can check it out. But spoilers. I'll say spoilers so I can start talking about it. So yes, obviously, first episode, like a few scenes in, I was like, oh, this is a body snatcher story. That was my thinking, right? Because we're seeing people be seemingly taken over. Interestingly, it's a signal from space that has like a sequence to create some kind of not bioweapon, or like, because they kind of compare it to a virus, but they say it's not exactly a virus. But they basically, we get the sort of almost. And I think this is the thing about the first half of episode 1 is that all the scenes are really well done, but they all feel like scenes I've seen in other things to some extent. Like the opening sequences of like guys running out to this like satellite in the desert, and they're excited because they've found some signal like that's beaming in, and they're debating what could it be. Is it just bouncing? Is it just something from us bouncing off the moon or something? And they're like, holy crap, are we making first contact here? Are we detecting an alien signal? They don't say those exact lines, but that's clearly what they're excited about. I feel like, if you've seen Contact, if you've seen any movie about getting a signal from space, you've seen these sequences in some form play out. And they're well done. They're not bad examples of those scenes. And when the body snatcher stuff starts happening, it's, again, if you've seen any Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or any even TV show that's done a body snatcher style episode, you again get this, like reminded of those sequences. So it's all very well done. It just wasn't feeling special yet. So halfway through episode 1, I was like, okay, like this is solid, it's doing stuff, but obviously I'm not. And admittedly, even if this does somehow at some point feel like it's on the same level as Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, it's not going to get there like in the first couple episodes, right? It's going to take time to get to those insane heights. That's too lofty an expectation to think you're going to get in episode 1 and 2. But, you have a level of expectations, and I think halfway through episode 1, I was like, okay, this is good, but I'm not feeling the spark yet. I'm not feeling the spark. But of course, we're also getting introduced to Carol, who's a writer, and she's doing book talks and signings. And she, we find out that she doesn't really like her work. She's doing these trashy, like pirate romance stories. and she's got these hardcore fans that are 99.9% women who are just into the romance of it. And she's being nice to them, but it's clearly a long day. Although there is one like pirate guy who's got a sword, which feels a bit of a no-no taking that into Barnes and Noble. But they go through all this stuff, and then she's clearly had a long day. She thinks her writing's like trash. She, whatever. And she has this relationship with her manager, who I think is also her life partner. And it seems like she's hidden from the world that she's gay. It sounds like she's never told anyone that. It comes up naturally in a couple of different ways. Her holding her hand, or later on in episode 1 where I think it's Helen's the other character. She's like, "Hey, should I like answer this question about which man you were thinking of when you created the pirate character?" And she's like, I don't really want to answer that. And she's like, "Should I be honest?" And he's like, "Nah, just say George Clooney." And it kind of sets up this idea of her hiding part of herself, and she's always had this kind of like secret part of her life, like just about anyone does, but it's really emphasizing this idea that she has things that she doesn't share with people. She has individuality, which of course is a big theme in anything that's body snatchers-esque or zombie-esque. And I'm not saying these characters, once they all change, are like zombies per se, but I think a lot of the themes of classic zombie movies are very applicable to this idea of becoming one of the masses and not an individual. Is very zombie movie-esque, as well as body snatchers-esque. So you've got a bit of both of those things kind of creeping in there. So obviously everything all bubbles up to obviously we see early on that they swapping saliva, so kissing or the woman licking the donuts is what spreads this thing, and then you shake for a little bit, you go into sort of like a catatonic state for a few seconds, and then you're just one of them. And you seem quite happy, and you see all these people in the lab who have just been turned for the first time, all like swabbing their mouths to like put some of their DNA out into the world so they can keep spreading this. And that's like a couple of months before the night, the night where it all happens. And we find out in episode 2 that was only done this way, this one big sort of thing to turn everyone, because the military by that point had discovered that this was happening, and that this was like seen as a way to avoid as much death as possible, even though lots of people do die on, I don't know what I'll call it, emergence night, maybe, whatever you want to call it, the happening. What did they call it on The Leftovers? The whole... I forget what they called it on that. But anyway, you know what I mean. The day where everything changes, the day where the big thing happens. It was a little bit unclear to me if some people just happen to die, it doesn't work and they just die instead, or if, because obviously there's people flying planes, there's people who are in situations where if they lose control, they're going to die, and clearly a lot of people die. And we find out in episode 2, it's like 700, 800 million people died in this moment, in this incident. But I loved how they presented all this, because this is where we fully... Because we've got a few scenes with Carol before then, but that's when we really start to stick with her in that episode, is when she's with Helen, and they're outside, and she's commenting on the planes all flying in unison, and how that's kind of weird. But then, this truck crashes, and she goes over to check on him. I love that, one, this was done in kind of a nice long shot where she turned and started walking towards the truck, and the camera just stayed behind her shoulder for a while. That was really suspenseful. That was when I really started to feel like the filmmaking was starting to hit for me. I was like, okay, I'm liking how we're building the moment to moment here. And then, of course, Helen collapses and she gets scared, and it seems like, she doesn't die right away. She dies when she's got to the hospital. But this is where the unique parts of this story started to like flourish for me, is when we get to these scenes of Carol having to take this guy's truck because she's got a breathalyzer in her car, and the car won't work if she doesn't have a clear reading, which I don't know if, like, I assume that's indicating that this is court ordered because she's got into trouble in the past for drinking under the influence, or do some cars just come with this now? I'm assuming it's the former, but especially since it's very much implied she has a drinking problem throughout both of these episodes. But she takes Helen to the hospital, right? And everyone there is also shaking and whatnot. And it's also worth mentioning, during all of this, I was thinking, wait, why is she not turned? And they made a point of pointing out that like she was drinking alcohol, but Helen wasn't. But I was like, it can't be that, because everyone else in the bar's all turned. And there's a lot of like her like sneaking around these people and try to get to the phone, and she accidentally knocks over the bartender who's still shaking. And obviously this all happens, she gets to the hospital, and there's a whole bit where she goes through the hospital and it's full of people who are standing still. Again, all sort of in the process of being taken over, or technically it's not being taken over once we understand it more, it's actually that they're all merging into the unified whole. But there's a whole thing where like, there's a baby in the carrier who's about to fall off the counter, and she pushes that back on. She has to get a stretcher, but immediately we're in this situation where she's just going through the hospital to find a stretcher on her own, and everyone's just standing there still around her. It felt kind of like a scene you'd get in a post-apocalyptic story, except the idea that everyone's still just standing there. And there's kind of like there's definitely like a dark comedy to a lot of this, and there's definitely some moments in episode 2 that were making me laugh because of the absurdity of the situation or the location they were in when they were having certain discussions or things like that. But then, you know, she does die though when she goes to get her. Helen dies, and this is when everyone in the background starts moving. So it just turns into a horror movie for about 30 seconds when you realize they're all moving and coming out of the building, and she starts to freak out. But then, of course, one guy tries to kiss her, she pulls away, which is notable because in the previous scenes when someone's kissed someone to infect them, they tend to like kind of go to resist, but then obviously within a second it starts to work and they stop resisting, and then they've been taken over. And I don't think that's unintentional either, that it's a kiss that they're using, because obviously the idea of forcing a kiss on someone is very violating, right? It's something that, you know, we would all consider to be a great invasion of your personal space and to be a sexual act of aggression. And I think that's intentional, because this idea of being taken over when you've not given consent is definitely something I think they want us to be thinking about. So making it admittedly, obviously, lesser on the scale of sexual acts that you could be doing. It could be sexually transmitted, which would make it much harder and much more horrific for like all these people to be taking each other over. But I think it is intentionally that kind of thing to make us think about how violating it is when it happens. But she pulls away, and then they all say in unison her name, right? I can't remember the sentence they say, but they all say, you know, we want to help you, Carol, or we won't hurt you, Carol, whatever they say. And that freaks her out. And this is when we get to the great oneer where we're just like on her in the truck, driving through, and there's like basically just all the people, or like all the taken over people are all just helping with things that need help with. You know, there's been crashes and things during this switchover where people were driving and they crashed into stuff. There's fires to put out. So we get this great oneer just looking at Carol in the truck, and then in the background we can see them dealing with crises that are going on, putting out fires. She goes through like a fire hydrant that's spraying water at the car at one point, and it's just this great shot that really just sells this idea of this chaos. But when I was saying how up until this section of the episode it didn't feel unique, like I was feeling some uniqueness in like her going around the bar or the hospital when people were just standing there. I think this scene though really sells this idea that, okay, this is kind of like a zombie story or a pod people, you know, Invasion of the Body Snatcher style story where everyone changes and there's like a few survivors left who are still normal and they're living in this new world. But the unique part of this is that immediately all the people who have been taken over are all working like a well-oiled machine to take care of things. And we get a lot more elaboration in this in episode 2. The first scene in episode 2 really hits this like home in a much bigger way. But this scene really shows this idea of them all just working efficiently to deal with what's going on. And no one's like chasing after her. No one's coming to try and grab her. Really, like, you know, they just kind of let her drive home, and then more creepy like kids come out and say, hey, you don't have to bash the door in with a rock, you've got a key hidden under the plant pot over there that you've forgotten about, which again is introducing this new idea of like, wait, how could they know that? So I'd already gotten the idea that they've all merged into some kind of hive mind because of the way they're speaking and the way they're acting, but they have this knowledge of where this thing is, and it's like, wait, how do they have that knowledge? And you come to realize that they have the memories of everyone that they have merged with. And the end of the episode is her in her apartment and they're trying to talk to her. She goes to the TV channels trying to figure out what's going on. And the one channel that's there is, it's the classic. I mean, I thought it was the president. It's not actually the president, but he's in, the press briefing area of the White House, and he's standing there, and the caption on the TV just says, "Call us on this number, Carol. We're ready to talk." And she obviously freaks out, but she decides, okay, I guess I need to call this number. And this is where, like, Rhea Seehorn's acting really came in to shine, was the way she just sort of went, yep, the first thing that the guy in the TV said to her when she's on the phone to him. But yeah, he explains that, we are us, right, which is the title of this first episode. Second episode is called Pirate Lady, which is also a good title. I'll get to that in a minute. But this stuff is kind of interesting because they're like, hey, we've all merged, we're all together, we are us, we are all one thing, and we don't know why you have not become a part of it, but we're going to work on that and figure it out. And she, for the first little while, she's just kind of saying one word like, yeah, okay, and eventually when she does start asking questions, it's like, well, what's going on? What's happening? It's dropping F-bombs left and right, yada yada. Is there anyone else like her? That's one of the questions that comes up, and he says, yeah, there's 11 more people like you who for some reason are immune to what's happened here, and we have to figure this out. People who are unique and cannot be brought into the whole. But it all feels very friendly. Like he says that you're not in danger, we're not going to harm you in any way, we have no interest in doing that, your safety is of our importance. But she does obviously ask a very important question towards the end, which is, what if I don't want to be merged? What if you figure it out and I say, no, you cannot take me? And he just starts to say, oh, once you've been merged, you'll see that it's actually, what you wanted, or it's quite good. And she turns off the TV and whatever. But yeah, it doesn't sound like there's much choice at play here, which is a big question that's also raised in episode 2. So we've got this idea that everyone's merged, right? And that's the key thing that comes out of this conversation as well, is that there's not an alien that's here. Yes, a signal did come from space that created something, this virus, if you want to call it that would allow people to join together into one mind, right? One shared mind, where now everyone who's connected are all part of the same entity, and they have all of the knowledge and skills of everyone that's been merged into it. So everyone on Earth now who's a part of this, which is everyone barring a dozen people, can all fly planes, they can all perform open heart surgery, they can all do this, that, and every skill you can think of, because someone in that blend had those skills, so now they all have that skills. And if anything, they're especially efficient at all these things, because it's not just, in episode 2, when Pirate Lady says, hey, you're about to suffer from heat exhaustion, she doesn't just say, because we've got a doctor who said that, she says, every medical professional that is a part of the system all agrees on this, because they're all together, like they've all merged all their knowledge together into a super knowledgeable being. So what does this do as far as a premise of a TV show goes? It does a few things. One, obviously we're going to be dealing with themes of individuality against becoming one of the masses, the benefits of being an individual versus the benefits of going along with everyone else. We're going to be dealing with these very unique set of characters who all work in unison together and don't even have to talk to each other because they're all connected all the time. And that's something the opening of episode 2 really shows, where when I was talking about stuff just playing out quietly as characters are doing stuff, the opening of episode 2 is one of those scenes, but it's so much bigger than scope than anything in the other Vince Gilligan shows, because it's like so unnatural, huge. Like, we start off in a country, and with this character who's Pirate Lady, or Zoja, I think that's what they said. I mean, that's what it is, but I can't remember if that's how he pronounced it at the end. I only heard it a couple times at the end of the episode, because one of the reveals is that Carol never learned her name because she never asked her name throughout the entire episode, and that's kind of a funny beat when she's like, who's that? And the other guy's like confused, like, wait, your companion, your chaperone, this woman here that's been with you the whole time. But we see her going through, like, we're in a different country, we're in somewhere in the Middle East, and she's going through different wreckage. She's pulling a dead body out of a car, someone who's like died during this crossover that's happened the previous night. But what we see here is that someone else drives up on a bike, helps her take the body out, or I think it's a truck first, but then someone on a bike drives up and just gets off the bike and like swaps places with her, and then she just gets on the bike and starts riding the bike, driving somewhere. And it's very clear as you're watching it that, like, because everyone's part of the same mind and the same system, they're just, like, you know, whoever's right for a certain job, for whatever the reason might be, they can just swap people around. So you've got this idea of, like, a guy rides up on a motorbike, gets off without a word, starts doing what she was doing, and she just walks off and takes the bike. And no one ever says anything or barely looks at each other. It just happens. Like, she knows he's there to drop this bike off for her, he's there to replace her, and she's going to drive somewhere else. Turns out she goes to an airport. She gets on a plane that's just sort of like prepped for her. She walks onto the plane on her own. There's no one else on the plane. It's a cargo plane. And she just straps in and starts flying. And this is, you know, the show teaching you that everyone in this system has all of these skills because they've absorbed everyone who has these skills. So she can just fly a plane. And she flies it, which, by the way, I laughed out loud at the end of episode 1 when, because I didn't know where we were in this, like, city-wise or like state-wise in the US, where she lives, Carol. But she mentions Albuquerque, which made me laugh because obviously a lot of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul was set around there. So I got a good chuckle out of, like, we're still in that area. Although we're doing a lot more globetrotting in this show, by the nature of what it is. You know, and she gets off the plane. She just gets out. There's only one person waiting on the tarmac to, like, sort of take care of the plane. And he's just waiting there happy. And no one looks upset when they're doing all this stuff or even overly serious. They're just, like, some of them are even kind of smiling. Like, they're very content at what they're doing. And she just gets off the plane. She walks into the airport. There's, like, there's no one there at first. She just walks through this empty airport, which is a surreal visual in and of itself. She takes off her clothes, dumps them in the trash right there in the middle of the airport, walks into the bathroom where there's a shower, and there's, like, 3 people who are, like, waiting for her, and they've got the shower ready for her. They've got, like, you know, a wig for her. They've got, like, you know, they've got clothes prepared, and they're just like, hey, go into the shower. She goes out of the shower, and no one cares that she's naked. It doesn't matter. We all know what each other look like naked. We're all one person, basically. So all of this plays out in silence, right? It's like, I don't know how long it is. It must be at least... It's at least 5 minutes. It might even be 10 minutes of just silence of, like, this journey of where we see her in one place, her trip to the airport, the plane, getting off the plane, all this stuff. And it all builds up to the idea of, like, why her? Why is this? Because effectively everyone's the same. So it's not because of a skill, right? There's no reason why they need someone specific for a skill. It has to be for some sort of physical reason, most likely. You know, maybe in some cases they need a short person, a tall person, you know, whatever. A stronger person, perhaps, for certain jobs or tasks, whatever it may be. It turns out the reason why this particular woman has been chosen to fly to where Carol is and go and try and talk to her, right, and give her some advice, and Carol, by this point, is digging a grave for her dead partner. And she's you know, she's digging away, and she's tired. She's, you know, suffering from heat exhaustion almost. And, you know, Zosha, who she calls Pirate Lady for the rest of the episode, the reason why she calls her Pirate Lady is because she has this realization after she talks to her for a bit. She goes and gets her book, and then looks at the cover of her book, and then her, and she realizes that this lady's been chosen because she looks like a female version of the pirate on the book cover. And this idea that this appearance would appeal to Carol and be pleasing and maybe calming, and maybe something that, oh, if she thinks she's attractive, she might calm down a little bit and open up and at least be a bit more relaxed or something. Like, they're trying to play on what will appeal to Carol. But it also reveals that they know more than they should, because this idea, one, that she would be more attracted to a woman is a secret, it seems to be anyway. But also this idea that the original version of this character in the first book she wrote was going to be a woman, but she changed it to a man, presumably to just be more, I don't know, sales friendly for the masses. And she kind of tears up here because she's like, oh, only me and my partner knew that. And this is where they reveal, yeah, like, she did join with us before she died. Like, we have all of her memories and knowledge. Would you like to know how she felt about you? And this freaks her out, and she gets mad and yells at her and screams, and Rhea Seehorn puts in all the acting kind of juju at her, right? She goes proper full Seehorn, if you will. And interestingly, what happens here is that she causes a reaction where Pirate Lady starts to shake, almost like when they first switched over. And part of me was thinking, oh wait, is she, like, somehow, like, switched this person back to an individual? how's that going to work if that happens? Well, what do we do here? But that's not the case, because then Rhea Seehorn, despite not liking this woman and not liking these people around her and refusing the water and being very suspicious of them and, you know, feeling obviously frustrated and scared about what's going on in the world, we do an important character detail here, is that she wants to still try and help her, because this is not right that this is happening to her, that she's reacting this way. So she does go looking for help for her. So, you know, character points for Carol, because you get this sense that she is wanting help still. And even later on, when she finds out that she's caused this, right? So she basically finds that everyone's doing this, right? Everyone is shaking, like when they first transitioned over into this new state of being. And she finds this guy dangling from a crane next to a building, and she basically wants to help this, and she's like, oh, I need to like diffuse this situation before this guy gets hurt. So we get her freaking out, trying to work the controls on this crane, this cherry picker style contraption, and as she's getting frustrated, some of the characters start moving again, and like this guy who was working with this other person says, hey, we can take it from here, Carol. And she's like, well, I was just trying to help. I wasn't. And he's like, yeah, we know, Carol. We know you were trying to help. And then the guy who's dangling also says, yeah, we know, Carol. I'm fine. And like they're all very pleasant about it. They're very happy about it. And when she goes back and she starts like, you know, when she goes back, actually, Pirate Lady's gone, because she told her to leave before she caused the reaction. She got very upset, obviously, at her. But she calls the number, because she was told to call 0 on her phone, and she can get anything she wants. Like, we'll bring anything to you need. She calls 0 and says, send Pirate Lady back. And Pirate Lady comes back and helps her dig. And when she comes, obviously, that's the other thing, is that she suggested that Carol get some tools that are better for the job from a neighbor's house. And when Carol comes back after this little trip, she sees that these have been left there lying for her. Pirate Lady took the liberty of getting stuff to help her. But the important thing here, other than, again, this idea that we have all the resources, everyone will pitch in to help you. So they fly in a digger to actually dig the plot of land in her back garden for the grave, and Carol just watches in awe. But one of the key conversations that happens here is that she asks her, you know, did I cause that? Did I make everyone like freak out and like go into this kind of almost seizure for a minute or two? And Pirate Lady says, yeah, we don't really know why, but or we do kind of know why, but like your extreme emotions when you get angry, we don't really know how to process those, so you basically caused like a computer crash almost in us. So everyone on Earth did that. And Carol, not being an idiot, immediately realizes that means that more people probably got hurt. She's like, well, did that hurt anyone? Did people die like when I did that? Like, you know, because again, some of these people were operating machinery. They were maybe driving or flying or whatever it might have been. Like, did this cause damage? And Pirate Lady says, yeah, I mean, worldwide, there was, you know, relatively a few deaths. And Carol says, dozens? And Pirate Lady won't say anything back to her. It's like, hundreds? And then Pirate Lady still won't say anything, implying that it's at least in the thousands. And Carol, like, you know, starts vomiting until she can't take it. And she's like, so that's like one of the other things we're kind of getting into here is like, obviously, this idea of individuality versus becoming one of the masses is a big theme here. But you've also got this idea of like the world now revolving around Carol, or Carol and these other like 11 or so people. It turns out there's 12 by the time we get to later in the episode. They discovered one more, apparently. But this idea that like her emotions and outbursts will actually affect everyone around her, but not just everyone, because we're doing science fiction, it's literally heightened to everyone on Earth will suffer negatively, potentially, when she has an outburst. Adding all this weight to her keeping her cool, even though she's in this situation where she understandably wouldn't be keeping her cool all the time. And I think that's like a super interesting conceit, especially since it happens again later in the episode. And it's like a bigger moment when it does. But the gist of the rest of the plot of episode 2 is that Carol's like, wait, these other people who are like me, how many of them speak English? And she's like, 5. At least as a second language, because they're all from different countries. And then she's like, okay, I want to meet them. So she kind of goes quiet for a second and then says, they all agreed to meet you. So they all fly to a central country, and they get off the plane at the airport. One of my own favorite little details that kept popping up in this was like some of the weird, quirky details that just made things feel a little bit more weird or real. Obviously, the big one is when the other guy shows up in Air Force One and they're having their meeting in like the Air Force One like room, like on the conference room, and like the guy is Mr. Diabashe? I don't think they said that. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about? The Air Force One guy. He's giving trivia about Air Force One, the movie, with Harrison Ford, as he's so excited that he was given Air Force One to fly around. It was available for anyone who asked, which is a line that Carol throws back in the face of Pirate Lady. But the plane ride there, though, we cut to the cockpit. Pirate Lady's in one pilot seat, and the other pilot seat's this young woman who's like maybe 21, maybe even younger than that. And I thought I recognized the outfit, right? But it didn't click right away what the outfit was. But when Pirate Lady goes to Carol and starts like asking if she needs anything, she's like, "Wait, like who's flying the plane?" Like, she calls her that TGI's girl. So basically, this is a case where it being a real thing made this funnier. Like, because sometimes if you put like a real chain or a real product in something, it can feel like product placement. And arguably this still is product placement of a sort. But this is legitimately funnier because it's a real place, because it made me laugh. And it also tells you that, like, again, it familiarizes the entire audience once again with this key concept of the show, is that everyone now has all the skills. So what better way to show that than to show someone who's got, you know, some young person who's got a waitress job is now just flying a jet, right? You know, a big passenger airliner jet. Nothing can convey this idea that everyone has equal knowledge now more than that kind of thing. There's actually a funnier one later on in the episode, but I really like the detail here of this being a specific place. They didn't just say a waitress. They put her in a uniform that I imagine a lot of people will instantly recognize. I didn't get it immediately. I had to, like, because I've not been to TGI's in such a long time, it didn't click that that's what the outfit was. But when she said it, I laughed because it was such a funny line. And especially since Rhea Seehorn was really selling it very well. This idea of her being freaked out that the waitress from TGI Fridays is flying the plane. And this is where we're getting, again, into the more unique parts of this and how we're doing something different with the overall premise of what this show is. So the big thing with the meeting, it becomes apparent like instantly when she meets these other people. They've all brought family members, right? They've all got family members who have switched. And they're still treating them like family members. They still brought them with them. Which obviously Carol only had this one person in her life, so she's kind of on her own. She doesn't have someone that she's attached to who's been taken over. So immediately you see some sort of frustration sort of forming there. And then the last person shows up with Air Force One because he's a little bit late. And he's like a bit of a character. He's got a bunch of like supermodel looking ladies there who are, again, they're all part of the hive mind. But it's this idea that if he asks for basically women to have sex with, they'll just sort of say, yeah, who would you like? Like, you know, in fact, at the end of the episode, he wants to take Pirate Lady, right? He makes that request. And it's weird to say that Pirate Lady's okay with it. What I really should be saying is they are okay with it. They do not care. They are happy to fulfill the needs of whoever's left for that long. Now, it does raise some interesting questions about what happens if they do succeed in taking over these last 12 people. Like, what does the world function like at that point? Do they have individual desires? Do they only have sex to procreate and no more? Do the babies get born already part of the hive mind? Do they have, you know, like that? I guess there's some interesting questions that get raised there. Like, what are they doing for fun? Are they always just working for happiness? Because right now it doesn't feel like they have any desires or have any like needs for comfort. They're happy to serve the people that are still quote unquote normal for now. But it's, I don't know, it's interesting. But they're very passive. They're vegetarian. Like, they're happy to serve any like animal like products like food, meat that are already there, but they won't kill new animals to make more. Although Air Force One guy does make a point of saying, "Hey, if I kill a pig myself, will you cook it for me?" And they said yes. Although they did say they would mourn the animal, but they won't interfere with anything they try to do. So it's interesting because obviously that makes them feel like they're kind of good in a sense, but at the same time, they also won't stop anything bad from happening, even the stuff they don't believe in. It's very passive and very kind of like non-committal in a strange way, where it's like, hey, we won't hurt you, but we won't stop anyone. Like, you know, she even says to her before she meets the other regular people, like, hey, we can't stop them from hurting you if one of them wants to. We will not interfere. It's this really weird, like, oh, it's easy to just not get involved, which again is maybe another theme here of this idea of we'll just stay out of the stuff that's tough to decide, kind of thing. But this meeting they have though on Air Force One, which again I was cracking up as he was making jokes or saying references to the movie, but like we have this thing, and then the visual of Rhea Seehorn sitting in front of that, like, you know, the not the flag, but the Air Force One symbol behind her as she's like making this speech about, okay, what do we do now? And the frustration that was teased when she first met them with everyone else around, and she was clearly a little bit miffed that they were still kind of like clinging to their families. She's like, what do we do? This is the end of the world. We have to like fight back, right? We have to do some kind of resistance or whatever. Like, what do we do? And they're all just kind of shrugging and nonchalant. Like the one woman gets kind of like combative with her. And she's like, hey, like, you do realize those people out there aren't still your family, right? Like, they're also everyone else. And the example with that woman is that she's like, no, my son is still my son. That 11-year-old's still my boy. And she's like, yeah, but he's also your prime minister, and he's also your gynecologist. And that actually comes back later in a funny way when they're at the lunch table, and she just sort of starts asking the 11-year-old questions about what the best methods of a pelvic exam are. And that was really funny. Like, I was really laughing at that. They set that up and they paid it off. Like, when she started like prodding these ideas to kind of make a point to the mother that, hey, he is all these things. He is worked on... He has worked pelvic exams. Like, he has those experiences, bizarrely, even though he's still technically your 11-year-old son. It's really strange, and I love the show, like, having the main character like poke at those questions. It does make her a very good conduit for the audience, because she's asking a lot of the questions that we would want to ask. Maybe not all in the right order that we would ask them in, but she's definitely getting to a lot of them, and she's prodding at the rules of this world that she's now in. And there is rules, seemingly. There does seem to be these things. And but yeah, they have these debates, and she's like, no, we should do something. She says, hey, we've all seen this movie. These are pod people. This is not going to end well. And the rest of them seem pretty content. And this Air Force One guy who says, hey, let's examine the other side of this here. In the last like day and a half since this happened, animals are free. No one is being robbed. No one is being murdered. No one is being abused. Race now doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. No one is being racist. No one is being prejudiced in any way. Everyone's part of the same thing. It doesn't seem like the end of the world. It kind of seems like they fixed all the problems. And these aren't bad points. I mean, she does say, I'm assuming all that's true, because like she's not necessarily seen enough to be sure of that yet. Then what have we lost, though, to achieve that? What have we actually given up? And we didn't choose to join this. That's a point she makes in the lunch scene, which is kind of next. Because when she's trying to provoke them into action, Air Force One guy just says, is anyone else hungry? And I really love the way he opens the door, the outside, the top of the stairs at Air Force One, and just yells out to all of I'll call them pod people for lack of a better term right now. All the pod people are just standing there. And he just yells out, we would appreciate some lunch, or something like that. But the way he asked for lunch made me laugh. And cut to them around a lunch table, and they're all getting favorites, because it's like, hey, this is something, like, we know how your grandmother used to make this, because her memories are in the hive mind, so we can literally produce your favorite food from your childhood, and so on. And this is where more debates start happening. There's more of Carol questioning things in front of the others. This is where the idea of like them being vegetarians comes into things, and how they will try and avoid hurting anything if they can help it. But Carol does bring up some very good points. Did anyone choose to be a part of this? Did you give anyone a choice? Did anyone at any point in this sequence actually choose to become part of this collective, this Borg-like mentality? And it's like, the answer always seems to be no, there's not a choice. It's just like an impulse for us. It's just like once you have this thing in your system, you want to spread it and to be a part of everything, but you'll be happy once it is. Because one of the questions that also came up in the previous scene in Air Force One is they all get mad at Carol because she admits that she never asked Pirate Lady or anyone else how it feels to be a part of this collective, because one of their arguments is that it sounds like they're all pretty happy being a part of this, like being part of the mass, part of the whole. And Carol doesn't have really an answer when they all start saying, well, you don't get to, like, you're sitting here telling us we need to do this, this, and this, and you've not even educated yourself as to what's going on. It does feel like it's really exploring these ideas of being informed, being uninformed, and like jumping to conclusions. And I think there's probably some truth that Carol has jumped to some extreme conclusions, but that doesn't mean that a lot of her concerns aren't valid, or that a lot of what she feels that she's in danger of losing is you know, in any way like wrong or incorrect for her to feel that way, right? Perfectly valid. So yeah, like this debate keeps going, and it turns out whilst they wouldn't tell Carol when she asked Pirate Lady how many people died as a result of her incident where she caused them all to have a seizure. I'm calling it a seizure for lack of a better term. I don't really, you know, a lot of these things don't have words yet, right? They've not given them names. But this does come up, right? It comes up because Carol, to make a point to the others, starts asking how many people died in this transition. And it's during this line of questioning we find out that, because she's asking, hey, you know, what about people in the space station? What about people in military, like submarines and things like that? Like, are they all turned? And we find out that they all get turned first, because the idea is you take those people that are harder to turn first, and then it's sort of like stealthy, maybe isn't the right way of putting it, but like, it's more methodical, right? To go about it that way. It's a smarter way of doing it. But because the powers that be on Earth became aware that this was happening, it was decided that doing the mass everyone turns at once, while it would kill a lot of people because of so many people being in situations that they would die for one reason or another, it would be less blood loss than some kind of war that would happen instead. That was the decision that was made collectively. So Carol asks, how many people died? How many people died when you made that choice? And the number, she's very precise, of course, but it's like 800 million around there. And this obviously kind of hurts, and she makes a comment about it. And the woman, the mother that she's been debating with in these two scenes, chimes in with, well, you killed 11 million yesterday, or something to that effect. And she turns and looks at Pirate Lady with a like, wait, that's the number you weren't telling me, Luke? And it feels like that hits her really hard, and this makes her act out. She starts drinking more and demands that she wants to go home. And she falls down. She kind of has a sort of collapsing kind of moment, and basically this all leads to another incident where she yells so much. Maybe she falls down after that, actually. I may be misremembering the order a little bit here, but she has another incident where she gets really like upset and scared and angry and starts yelling, "Leave me alone," at Pirate Lady. And this causes another incident where they have a seizure, and she looks back at the table, and all these other regular people, these other 6 regular people, are all holding their family members who are having seizures and getting scared that there's something wrong with them. And we don't know how many people probably died in this second incident, but there is this like acknowledgement after the fact that probably killed a whole other bunch of people, and then that was her that did this. That her outbursts when this stuff happens is affecting people around the world. It's, you know, there's like, it's hard for her to even quantify how much effect she's having on people. And it's interesting that she was kind of a celebrity, like a minor celebrity as a book author before, because she was kind of not really appreciative of the fact that she was having an impact on all these people, right? Her manager / partner kept having to kind of say, hey, show them you're paying attention. You know, they're all caring, they're all adoring you. Like, it's not that bad, and they're also paying you a lot of money. Like, you're kind of rich because of it. Like, this idea of her being unaware of the number of people she's affecting, but is grasping it now that it's resulted in their death. And it's interesting that these are people who have been taken over. These are people who have merged as part of the mass. And she still cares about them, which shows she still, on some level, sees them as living, even if they're not quite who they were before. right? There's still an acknowledgement that these are still people, and she still feels something for their death. She's not like, oh, well, I don't care because they're not one of us anymore. Even though she also says to the others that, hey, they're not really them anymore either. They're not quite human anymore. And she calls them all traitors at this dinner as well. It's a whole thing. So the episode 2 ending is building up to this idea that Air Force One guy wants to take Zoja, right? Pirate lady. And this is where we get the funny scene where she doesn't know her name. And she's like, why? And he just kind of makes a face like, I want to bang her. Like, I want to have sex with her. She's quite nice. And she's like, oh, come on. And she kind of criticizes him. He's very gaudy. He's got Air Force One. He's going to go live in Elvis's suite in Vegas, hoping to find his ghost or something. Like, he's kind of a character who's really enjoying acting like he's the emperor of the world, right? And he's not like a bad guy. He's not necessarily doing anything wrong. Although Carol does kind of point out, especially when they bring Pirate Lady back out of the scene, like, he wants to use you as a sex doll, right? Do you not think that's a problem, that he's got a harem, that like he's just doing whatever he wants and everyone's just willingly giving it to him? Like, isn't this a little bit creepy? And he like gets, not super defensive, but kind of says, hey, like, have I done anything to the mass, like to you all, that has been unwanted? Have I stepped over a line? And he asked that question, and Pirate Lady just says, no, to us all affection is wanted. And she just kind of gives that blanket answer. But it does kind of feel like, yeah, but I guess none of these people do care about their individual body per se. They do still say this individual's name was so-and-so, but they clearly don't think of themselves that way anymore. Just like Pirate Lady's not thinking about who she was physically before the switchover. But yeah, I mean, Carol just says, if you want to go with him, go. Although, notably, Pirate Lady says, we can't make that choice because choosing would hurt one of you, and we can't do that. You have to make the choice yourself. But seemingly, she has, Carol said, okay, fine, go with him. Go, whatever. But the end of the episode is Carol changing her mind, right? That's the important, like, character beat at the end, is that Carol's on her own plane, getting ready to fly home, and she sees Pirate Lady going into the other plane, and like, the guy being all kind of like smarmy and kind of putting his arm around, and he's all happy and like ready to go have a party because that's the type of guy that he is. And even though she's very confused by these feelings, I think that's the complexity here that's really good, and the performance from Seehorn's excellent here, because you can get this idea on her face almost entirely that she's starting to feel regret of this choice, but confused why she does feel that regret. But the episode ends with her running off the plane, running in front of Air Force One, and holding her arms up to block the plane from taking off. And as we've seen, we know they will stop because they seem to just adhere to whatever requests that any of the regular humans that are left have. So that's how the episode ends, is her saying stop, don't go, kind of thing. And we end with that pivotal choice. And it's kind of interesting that in some level she is now maybe feeling attached to this one entity that is part of the whole, even though she knows and we know that they are just part of one big mass of people now. They are not individuals in the traditional sense. And it's maybe exploring that idea of how we as humans kind of do form attachments to things that can't form attachments back in some way, right? Where you maybe see a piece of clothing or something is lucky or something that you grow some affection for, that you keep around, and you even treat certain things like they're alive that aren't, like people who talk to their car, or whatever example you want to think of. And I'm not saying that the people in part of the mass are inanimate objects per se. I'm not trying to say that, but like just this idea that she's forming an attachment with someone who isn't an individual. And maybe we can explore some ideas of how people form attachments to things that aren't individuals, and like the health behind that. And part of me at this point doesn't even know exactly like where we're going with this. I feel like there's very much like multiple sides that this show is exploring so far, where I'm like, part of it feels like it would be healthy for her to open up and be more receptive to some kind of like relationship, because she has cut herself off so much and she's only had this one person that she's close to her most of her adult life, it seems like. But on the other hand, as if we're going to do some of these ideas of individuality being important, it does kind of feel like both sides, if you will, are going to learn something perhaps in the growth of the story of the show, potentially, right? This idea that the mass will realize that there is some importance to individuality, but that there's also stuff to learn from them, for Rhea Seehorn's character, and perhaps, anyone really, about how we approach things, about how we don't work together. Like, seeing these people all work together in complete harmony and unison is so efficient and is so simple. And yes, if there is no crime and no violence and nothing bad, no one's doing anything bad to each other, that's kind of an interesting concept. Although it does also make me wonder, though, the people who would do that kind of thing normally, the people who would murder, who would attack people, who would do nasty things, surely they're also in there, right? They've also been assimilated in this kind of like everyone blends together kind of virus. Or maybe they didn't accept them. Maybe they, I don't know, jettisoned them or whatever from the pack. I have no idea. But maybe that's a question we'll explore in a future episode, is this idea of like some of the like serial killers or psychopaths that they also kind of absorbed into the greater mass. Like, how does that function? Does that mean that there's some darkness in there, or does it simply mean that the greater whole has a better understanding of certain psychology that they wouldn't otherwise, because maybe they can understand why this person was driven to that point in some way? But regardless, it would be an interesting topic to explore in the future, I think. But needless to say, everything I have said about this show's themes so far, which I'm still kind of like getting to grips with, because it's new. It's only been 2 episodes, and we're trying to take it all in. And there's clearly a lot of depth to this by the end of episode 2, which I really like, both from an individual character perspective, but also how we just view society. So there's a lot going on there. All of this is to say that it's doing science fiction very well, because the whole point of science fiction normally isn't just to have some pretty laser beams and aliens and whatever. It's to ask questions about people and explore things in a way that you wouldn't normally be able to, like, right? Sometimes they're just simple allegories for real things, but to sort of hide them a little bit and make it feel like we can talk about a tougher subject. And sometimes it's just such a unique idea that we can explore a topic in a way that you can never do under normal circumstances. And I feel like that's kind of what this one's more leaning towards. And it does feel there's a lot going on here that I'm excited to see how it progresses, and how like more little tidbits and character interactions will open up kind of the ideas of the show and like really the main points that it's getting at. But it feels very rich so far. And the other thing here is just how strong the direction is. It feels like scene to scene, everything is so well paced, and like I say, that methodical approach to direction really starts to come into it in the same way that I felt in those other Vince Gilligan shows. And the opening of episode 2 and that entire process, and then you realize, oh, this is all about this woman who's coming to see Carol, and like there's all of the steps of the process to get there. And it also not only does it give you this idea of like, and it's a very Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul thing of like, what is the purpose of this current thing we're watching, and then it's revealed by the end, and that's very exciting. But you also get in this context of this early stages of a science fiction show of it kind of like just showing how the world works now, about how she kind of switches places with other people, and she goes on this trip, she can fly a plane. It teaches you so much about the world without ever uttering a single word. And that is good visual storytelling, which makes it very engaging, even though the concepts are so, up in the sky high. Like, they're so huge here. We're not doing simple little character bits or bits of character growth in normal ways. We're doing this insane sci-fi show. And I think that feels a lot more kind of big and bold and arguably less nuanced at first, because it does feel like, oh, we're doing kind of these ideas that have been in these other sci-fi movies. But I think by the end of episode 1, but certainly by the end of episode 2, it felt like it added so much weight in how it tackled so many of the ideas and character moments that by the end of episode 2, I'm like, oh, this feels like Vince Gilligan. I don't know if I felt that in the first, several scenes of episode 1, but it slowly came into it as I was watching the 2 episodes. And by the end of episode 2, I'm like, okay, like, you've got me, because I'm like, I like this character. This concept's super unique and interesting with the way, again, it didn't start off feeling unique, but by the time it got into the intricacies of how it works in this show and how everyone's just kind of happily part of one whole, and then the question of, do I join that or do I not? Because, does this one whole just represent normal society? And, Rhea Seehorn's character Carol is just someone who's on the outside of society, and it's about giving in to actually being part of the world. As an introvert, I kind of relate to that a lot, actually. So I can see them doing something with that. There's so much going on here. I'm excited to do more, and I've talked enough about these first two. But this is going to be weekly now going forward. It's obviously number one now on my to-watch list each week. So let me know what you thought of this first pair of episodes in the comments. As possible, I've missed some details that I did like or wanted to talk about, and there's just so much in 2 episodes that it's hard to. But let me know in the comments what you thought of these first 2 episodes. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you're looking for reviews of the other Vince Gilligan shows, Breaking Bad's maybe a one-day rewatch review. Most of Better Call Saul was reviewed, though, with me and Connor on this channel. So if you want to check those out, certainly from season 3 onwards. Actually, I think season 2 has some reviews, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But certainly from season 3 onwards, me and Connor were reviewing that pretty religiously until the end of that show. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the shows and reviews over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. It helps me keep making all these reviews, both here and in the movie podcast over at MailFuzz Movies. Check those out if you want. There's a sci-fi movie podcast that I do with David, where we talk about a sci-fi movie every week. We just did Begonia. We'll be doing the new Predator movie this coming week. So thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?